Ms. Lewis.
A scholar cut down, a son lost. July 22nd, 2024, the Niagara Conference on Workplace Mobbing. We start with the end. On April 2, 2023, Joel Inbody was fatally and tragically shot by Border Patrol agents near Las Cruces, New Mexico. At 8:37 p.m., having never crossed or attempted to cross the border, Joel circumvented the cones of a security checkpoint on Interstate Highway 10, 30 miles inside the US border. He was upset and he was confused. Multiple agents began to follow him. He drove 40 miles per hour in distress, alone and afraid, trying to find a way, anyway, not to have to stop and interact with them. They boxed him in, guns drawn, they shouted profanity at him, they threatened him. They let him drive away, only to disable his car with spike strips on the road. When the car wouldn't move any further, he got out and he walked away. He was unarmed. He had done nothing wrong but avoid a checkpoint. They were never in any danger, but they fatally shot him at 10:01 p.m. As Ken Westhuse wrote in the preface to Joel's book, it was a coterie of half a dozen ill-trained, trigger-happy Border Patrol officers that failed to recognize Joel's emotional distress and took Joel's life that night. That was the second mobbing that Joel experienced. I'm Kimberly Lewis, I'm Joel's mom, and I'm here to carry on Joel's work and to speak for him. He would have been proud to stand here and present his work. The manuscript he wrote that tells the story of the academic mobbing that he underwent at the University of Massachusetts as a PhD student. But instead, I will tell you his story because he can no longer speak for himself. His traumatic experiences at UMass Amherst, the first mobbing, the one he wrote about, was a primary cause of his mental state that night on Interstate Highway 10, 30 miles inside the US border, when the second mob took his life. We will come back briefly to that story at the end. In 2009, when Joel was graduating high school, he ran for school board. In an interview for the local paper, he talked about his plans to study pre-law at Geneseo and pursue a career in politics, with his sights set on being a senator. As a high school student, he worked at McDonald's and he was involved in Boy Scouts, wrestling, track and field, chorus, band, and drama. He had many friends, although he was always a nonconformist. Growing up in our household, he had practiced a Christian faith with us, attending church and youth group and studying the Bible. But he turned away from the things he'd been taught because he could not empirically understand them. Two quotes from the legacy pages after his death stand out about him at this time. John Weaver, one of Joel's high school teachers, wrote, "Possessing a wealth of intellectual curiosity, Joel added an essential element to my high school English classroom. His presence stoked his peers to explore profound insights and worthy considerations. Joel pushed his talents beyond his comfort zone. He innately realized he had much to offer his piece of the world, and he wasted little time proving his mettle." Paul Payette, one of his youth group leaders, wrote, "Thank you for not taking the world at face value or for granted. Thank you for always exploring, inquiring, and wanting, needing to know why and how. Thank you for your precision and your insistence that details matter. Thank you for your fortitude and your courage, for standing up for what you believed, even when, not if, it put you out on the end of a bough by yourself. Thank you for being authentic, sometimes at a cost. Thank you for being patient and forgiving, especially in the midst of misunderstanding. Thank you for being kind, compassionate, and gentle." As a student at Geneseo College, Joel began to pursue a degree in political science with a pre-law focus, but his interest expanded far beyond his major. He spent hours hunting for and studying fossils. He led an organization called the Secular Students Association, which ran interfaith dialogues between atheists and religious groups. He had left his Christian faith behind, but his interest in religion as a construct grew. He found his love of the study of sociology and a mentor in his professor, Steve Journet. Journet encouraged Joel's interest and research, and soon Joel was traveling to Santa Fe, New Mexico as a 21-year-old undergraduate student presenting at his first national academic conference. He presented a paper entitled Somatic Experiences and the Source of Religious Conviction at the biannual meeting of the Society for the Anthropology of Religion on May 1st, 2011. During his undergraduate studies, he was also diagnosed with a temporal lobe partial seizure disorder. He began taking Lamictal and the symptoms disappeared. As he approached graduation, he began applying to graduate schools with plans to study sociology and pursue becoming a professor. He interviewed at Emory, and although he did not get an offer there, he met another prospective graduate student who would become an important part of his life. He was offered partial funding at Chicago University and SUNY Stony Brook, but he didn't want to go into debt to study, so he came home for a gap semester. He began at the University of Buffalo as a non-matriculated student of sociology in January of 2014. His academic work quickly showed the quality he could offer the program, and he was accepted in the fall with full funding, including a presidential fellowship, which was rarely given to students studying at the master's level. Joel continued his interest in sociology of religion, and he studied both Pentecostal Christians and Jehovah's Witnesses. He was published in the Sociology of Religion during his time at UB, and he found a mentor at UB as well, Professor Mike Farrell. During Joel's second year in the program, a few important things happened. His mentor retired. He experienced the onset of new symptoms of the neurological disease, which had led to a new diagnosis, bipolar disorder. His doctor increased the dosage of the medication he'd already prescribed for the seizure disorder, as it was effective for both. Joel's relationship with the young woman he met at Emory continued, and she came to live with him in Buffalo during his last semester. They applied to various PhD programs with hopes of studying together. He graduated summa cum laude with his MA in sociology in 2016, and he moved to Sutherland, Massachusetts as a fully funded PhD student at the University of Massachusetts, Amherst. His longtime girlfriend moved to Boston to begin her PhD at Harvard, but they still plan for a life together. In September of 2016, Joel was far from home and alone. He did not sync well with the first professor he worked with as a TA, and he struggled to find his place at UMass. By his second semester there, the longtime romantic relationship had crumbled under the weight of the distance and the difficulty of both of them starting in new, challenging, competitive programs. He began to struggle with some bipolar symptoms, and he was authentic in sharing that with a couple professors and colleagues. He sought help in the campus clinic, and he began to see a counselor regularly. In April of 2018, Joel filed a grievance against a professor. It was the same professor that he TA'd with during his first semester. And this action is the one that Joel identifies as the act that was a catalyst for the academic mobbing that quickly followed. In this stressful time, Joel became distant from family, and he struggled to stay connected to the few colleagues at UMass that were his friends. Joel had journaled regularly since middle school, and he kept detailed notes of all of his experiences. After leaving UMass, in an effort to heal and try to process what had happened to him, Joel found Kenneth Westhue's writing and found a name for his experiences: academic mobbing. He decided to write an account of it all so that he could critically explore it. In his introduction, he explains, "I analyze content from numerous records, emails, police reports, notes, letters, blog posts, and pictures. And I rely on autoethnography to describe the mobbing that I lived through in Thompson Hall." Joel wrote and framed his understanding of his experiences around the model created by Tigran and Coquelin, who identify 5 phases to an academic mobbing. The pre-mobbing conflict, stressors, and a critical incident. 2, a targeted person is maligned, isolated, and manipulated. 3, university administrators or management get involved without full information, usually in favor of instigators. 4, a targeted person is labeled innately problematic, for example, hard to work with or mentally ill, and is reassigned or fired. And 5, a targeted person leaves the university as the mob continues to make problems for them. Joel titled his manuscript, "The Definition of Unethical, the Mobbing of a Graduate Student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, 2016 to 2019, Thompson Hall, Sociology Department." Chapter 1, the academic mobbing in the literature. Joel includes a thorough review of the available literature on mobbing to highlight their history, severity, and progression. In chapter 2, before the mobbing, Joel discusses personal characteristics and interpersonal stressors which he believed made him more vulnerable to mobbing. Chapter 3, the first wave of harassment, is a description of the critical incident, the grievance he filed against a professor, and the first wave of harassment that followed him, accusations that he was manic. Chapter 4, a second wave of harassment, contains false accusations that he sexually harassed a female undergraduate, at which point instigators began to involve high-ranking accomplices. Chapter 5, a third wave of harassment, were the false allegations that Joel owned a pistol and planned a shooting on campus. Chapter 6, he calls parting shots, police surveillance, and a cover-up, that characterized the end of the mobbing as he left Western Massachusetts and tried to move on with his life. In his conclusion, he gives advice to future students who are facing academic mobbing and policy suggestions for states and academic departments that he believed could end mobbings in the United States. He was placed on an enforced leave from his position as a TA. He was brought up on Title IX charges. He fought back, showing that their evidence was in fact a part of a setup against him that did not hold up to scrutiny. He was stalked and harassed by the university police. He won the case. He was cleared of all charges. And yet, he was banned from the department building, and his supervisor refused to give him a TA assignment, saying, "Your services will no longer be needed." He secured a small settlement with help from the TA union in exchange for withdrawing from the program. And then he was banned from campus. They overwhelmed me with lies, malicious gossip, bureaucratic tribunals, and by falsely reporting serious crimes. I deliberately asked that the settlement I received not include a silencing clause because I intended to draw attention to former colleagues' duplicity and cruelty. They tried to frame me as a deranged school shooter. They called the university police and lied to them when I calmly questioned them about their actions. They caused me to suffer from PTSD, which I struggled to cope with for several years, and nearly drove me to a suicide attempt. Their behavior is inexcusable. The instigators behaved with deliberate malice, as did the high-ranking university employees. In January of 2020, Joel was hospitalized for 27 days, treated for a period of delusional psychosis directly related to the academic mobbing. Joel was released and he began working as a security guard to pay for his room in a house that he shared with strangers in Buffalo, and he reconnected with family. Joel found the Edwin Mellon Press, and he began to work with Dr. Richardson, who mentored him in completing the work that would have been his doctoral dissertation. In January of 2022, the press published his work, The Praxis of Inequality, the study of 3 ancient agricultural societies, Egypt, China, and Mesopotamia. Joel continued to write and revise his document about the academic mobbing at UMass. His academic research never ended. Calling himself an independent scholar, he continued to revise his work on Jehovah's Witnesses and to submit it for publication to numerous journals. He developed his drawing talent, and he posted his art on a blog site that he called All Hail the Underdogs, housed on the website deviantart.com. He signed a contract with the press to publish a book including biographies and his original drawings of the men and women known as heretics, more of the underdogs. He secured a position as a housing specialist for Belmont Housing Resources of Western New York. In his legacy pages, colleagues there described him as articulate, talented, and kind. They told stories to me at the wake of his friendship and support when they were going through struggles of their own. He became a paralegal working for the Center for Elder Law and Justice, and later the Bernardi Law Firm. And then once again, the end. In March of 2023, Joel began a cross-country trip alone. He went from Maine down to Florida and across the Southwest through New Mexico and into Texas. He was alone on a journey to see the country. He paid his April rent and his car insurance at the end of March, indicating his plan to return home to his apartment in West Seneca, New York, when he had finished his trip. On April 3, 2023, Joel Embody was fatally and tragically killed by Border Patrol agents in the desert near Las Cruces, New Mexico. Kenneth Westhues wrote, "This book is about mobbing that Embody underwent in 2018 and 19 at the University of Massachusetts. It's the only mobbing he lived to write about. It harmed him occupationally, financially, socially, and psychologically, but he lived to tell the tale. The mobbing in Amherst was genteel, woke, postmodern, nonviolent, slow, and steady. It was carried out by highly educated faculty and students in a university. That academic mobbing helped set the stage for the second one, the one in the New Mexico desert. Here too, individuals surrendered their individuality, formed themselves into a cohesive group, and acted collectively to get rid of Joel Embody. Unlike the first mobbing, this one was crude, quick, extreme, violent, and lethal. It was carried out by ill-trained, trigger-happy border agents. The second mobbing was not unrelated to the first. Being forced out of a doctoral program in the field that Embody considered his vocation was traumatic. As he describes in his book, and as commonly occurs in academic mobbing, it meant a crisis in all aspects of his life: occupational, financial, familial, emotional, psychological. It was the accumulated crises in his life that led to his encounter with the Border Patrol officers in New Mexico. I recently discovered the Washington Office on Latin America, a nonprofit research and advocacy organization advancing human rights in the Americas. In April of 2022, they launched borderoversight.org, where they maintain a database of troubling events that have occurred at the border since 2020. They write, "While there's much about the overall strategy we change, the agents themselves are often dedicated and honorable, and we hold in high esteem many whom we've met. But there's a dark side. We also hear a lot that concerns us. Much of what we learn recalls behaviors and patterns we have seen elsewhere in our Latin America-based work, typical of powerful military and police forces in the region that have abused human rights with impunity. We hear about agents and officers misusing lethal force, carrying out dangerous vehicle pursuits, using abusive language, and much else. When this behavior happens, public complaints often go nowhere, and an internal affairs and inspector general apparatus issue few meaningful punishments. Though we believe the vast majority of Customs and Border Protection officers and Border Patrol agents are honorable and committed to their mission, we hear about them protecting their abusive colleagues, blocking oversight with a wall of silence, a phenomenon all too common in law enforcement agencies at all levels. We keep hearing about these indicators of a troubled culture at CBP and Border Patrol. It's a scattered mass of troubling items, dispersed like puzzle pieces and often forgotten." Joel Embody, November 22nd, 1990 to April 3, 2023. A scholar cut down, a son lost. If you want to purchase this book, it has a new title. Dr. Richardson had it out today. I believe there's just one copy with them today, but you could order it. And Kenneth Westhuse is keeping a active page on his website that has links to the 3 days of Channel 4 Buffalo, New York investigative reporting that was done back in September, and also links to the transparency documents of the Border Patrol. I'm Kimberly Lewis. I'm Smile.